Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Post Trauma. I play on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, and PC. So let's get into the story. You play as an older man named Roman who is waking up in a subway not really knowing what the hell is going on. And I mean, that is kind of the theme of the story. Not really, it's not the theme, but you feel that throughout of just kind of what the hell is going on. The story is kind of sparse. You get bits and pieces here or there. It's never directly spelled out for you. Even at the end, and I got the good ending where they do more or less spell it out, it's still more on the less side of the spelling it out than the more. But wherever the hell Roman is, it's creepy as fuck. I gotta say, I actually kind of liked the storytelling. There's a lot of times where I'll bitch and moan about the storytelling being very sparse, but this is a fairly short game, so it actually kind of works, and it works with the experience and what's going on. Roman really doesn't know what's going on, so the story being sparse is kind of cool versus the games where like the story is spelled out for you, but then your character doesn't know what the fuck's going on, which can be a little weird. So it actually works in this game having a somewhat sparse story. Now let's move on to the audio. And the first thing I'm going to say is for the voiceover work, some of it is definitely better than others. Roman, despite his name, I'm fairly certain is supposed to be a Japanese man. And you get a bit of that in his accent, but his delivery is also not flawless. So it's a bit of a struggle with him. It's not terrible, but it's not great. Some of the other characters are just way over the top. The voiceover work is a little inconsistent overall. I mean, I got used to it and I felt like it works well enough given the size of the game, but it could be better. What is far better is the music. The music is great in this game. I really think they nailed it with the music. Admittedly, it feels at times like it's doing a bit more than paying homage to its inspiration, Silent Hill. But at the same time, there's a lot of music that doesn't go full Silent Hill, which does somewhat separate Post Trauma. As for the sound effects, I think the sound effects are really good in building a spooky atmosphere in this game. Whether you're just walking down the hall, whether it's the creatures, whether it's just other small details in the rooms, hearing the clock ticking way too fast, hearing weird clicking or screams or fleshy noises, stuff like that. It builds a good spooky atmosphere. Now onto the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and I've already said a few things that should lead you to believe that this is a survival horror game, which it is. And it actually does some kind of cool things with some semi-fixed cameras. There are times where it goes first person. There are times where you get a little bit more control over the camera. And while it's meant to, and it really has sold itself on being like an homage to ye olde Silent Hill, it has definitely updated the controls. So you actually have a dodge function, you have a lock-on function, you can move while in combat. That being said, they've put a considerable amount of work into the combat, though it is not flawless. And it feels a little unnecessary in some ways because there's not a lot of combat in the game. You're at most gonna fight like 3 creatures in a chapter, which, as I mentioned, is a fairly short game. The chapters aren't crazy long. If you've already beaten this and you really remember all the puzzles and where everything is, you could probably get through this game in under 4 hours, maybe 5. But I do think that was actually kind of cool that despite the fact it's not a huge part of the game, they did put a lot of effort into the combat. Though it does run into a few issues, like I picked up a weapon that's kind of a secret weapon that's not really secret, but like when I would lock on to certain enemies, my character just would fully fucking miss. He'd swing to like the right of them. He wouldn't really target them despite the fact being locked onto them. Whereas there were other enemies where it worked much better against, so that's a really horrible inconsistency and it makes some of the combat a little frustrating. But mostly I really only ran into it with that one weapon, but it was such a powerful weapon. That being said, if there's not a lot of combat, what is there? It's mostly puzzles, and like the entire levels are puzzles, and I actually found myself using my phone a lot. Like I would take pictures of my screen to like capture the clues. Because some of these puzzles, the answers are just scattered across the area. So memorizing all of that was kind of a pain, so I just started taking pictures, especially of some of the more complicated puzzles, because they'll give you false answers. Like there was one where you need to press like 5 buttons, but if you ran around and saw all the different clues, there's like 7 or 8 clues, but only 5 of them are actually for the puzzle. The rest of them are just, you know, red herrings. I should also point out that the camera doesn't always work with you. There were a couple times in combat where I was like locked on, but because it's like this semi-fixed camera, like it wouldn't show me the enemy until I got way closer than I would like to be, considering there's an enemy and I can't see it yet. All of that said though, I really did like what they did with the gameplay. I think they did an awesome job making it somewhat unique, because lightening the load of combat, despite the fact they put effort into it, and focusing on puzzles and with false leads and all of that, I thought that was cool and does, despite the fact Post-Trauma is trying to be like a yieldy Silent Hill homage type game, it gives it its own identity as well. Now let's move on to the controls, and overall they work. I don't love the controls in this game. They didn't necessarily master the fixed camera. There are times where you are running, camera changes, and all of a sudden your character goes in the wrong fucking direction because of a camera change. There was one time where I got stuck in like a loop. The controls do some weird fucking glitchy shit. Like the loop wasn't even due to like the camera angle changing on me. Honestly, the controls are kind of one of the worst features in this game. Like there's this weird thing where you hold down the left trigger to start your character jogging, and you're meant to hold it down for them to jog so that you can let it go so that they can regain stamina. Well, if you go through a door or trigger a cutscene while jogging, your character is now toggled into jogging, and you have to tap the left trigger or just completely stop moving for them to stop automatically jogging. And at times it works. When there's no enemies, you know, the auto jogging is kind of nice despite the fact it's a glitch. But if there are enemies still around and you run into one and your stamina is drained, well, you're in some deep shit. I also had an issue where the game glitched on me a couple of times and I thought I was going fucking crazy because all of a sudden my camera controls were switched. I would get out of a cutscene or I would start a level and my inverted camera was now not inverted, and it was just fucking with my brain, and I'd have to go back into the settings and re-invert my controls. Not even re-invert, I had to uninvert and re-invert because it was still set to invert, but it wasn't functioning inverted. So yeah, controls not the strongest point in this game. Now let's get into the graphics and visuals, and graphically, yeah, it's not an amazing looking game. It's not terrible. Again, we're in that era where most things look fairly good, and it does look fairly good. There are some impressive details in there. There are some weird graphical glitches with Roman's mustache, like blowing in the wind when there's no wind. But the detail's there, and you can see a lot of detail in like the character's clothing and how it can move. Not that it's always phenomenal, but there is actually a decent amount of graphical fidelity bringing the world to life. Honestly, a surprising amount of graphical fidelity, all things considered. So while it's not the most stunning from a graphic standpoint, there is enough there and it's good enough. It's not mind-shattering though. What is awesome and like just insanely well done in my opinion is the design, all of the art style, all of that stuff. That is where this game really succeeds. Building a truly spooky atmosphere. You go to a bunch of different areas and each one of them is so very well designed for what they're going for in the game. That subway was creepy as fuck. There's a point where, of course, hospital, kind of a stereotype, but creepy as fuck. And there's weird elements to each one. Things that clearly don't fit. There's somebody setting up mannequins or some shit for no reason. And as creepy as the mannequins are, there's all sorts of other creepy shit going on. There's walls where the bricks are pulsating and they use some great camera angles, just kind of tilted, that make you feel just a little uneasy. And maybe you'll start tilting your head. I know I did. But even beyond that, while there's not a ton of creatures or a ton of combat, the design for them is awesome. While yes, some of the design will kind of evoke Silent Hill in your brain, it is unique enough from Silent Hill that again, Post-Trauma somewhat sets itself aside and unique from Silent Hill. But I did like that each area, despite the fact they were maintaining that creepy atmosphere, they did feel different. You did feel like you were in a different place than you were before, and that they didn't fully rip off Silent Hill. There was no regular world and hell world, which I thought was cool, and despite all the hype around the game being an homage to Silent Hill, they didn't go and fully rip it off, and that was cool visually. They used darkness well, they used lighting incredibly well. Overall, the direction of the game I think was phenomenal. There were some weird visual issues here or there when they were trying to do things like flowing hair. There were a couple of times where my character stepped on a few things and like overstepped and it looked a little funky, or like stood on some weird objects, etc. But nothing that was like really horribly distracting. Though I will say some of the animation could be better, specifically for the human characters. I mean, creepy, weird animation and movements works great for, you know, the monsters. So the last kind of glitch thing I will address is the game did like freeze on me during a loading screen, and I had to quit out and jump back in, so all I missed was a loading screen. So that's cool, still slight bit of a pain there. Okay, so let's get into the wrap up. And the first thing I'm gonna say, it's a $15 game. So if it feels like I'm giving this game some slack on issues that I ran into, I am, because it's a $15 game. If this was a $70 game, like a full price game, supposed to be a AAA game, and I was running into a lot of these issues, I'd be shitting way harder on this game. But it does earn a bit of leeway because while it was trying to pay homage, it wasn't ripping off. It did make itself unique. It did put effort in a lot of places, even some where it was unnecessary, but they put a lot of effort into the areas that were necessary. A good spooky story, good spooky music and sound effects, just building a great visual atmosphere. So while there are plenty of issues, I enjoyed what they did, and at the price, it's really hard to not recommend this. Okay, so I've probably asked this before, but in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, what's your favorite survival horror game of all time? And I mean the like real horror games. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.